Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books down from the shelf, blow the dust off them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. I'm Tom Gowley, and joining me today is Tony Pasculi.
Happy to be here as always.
And today we're talking about one of my favorites, Ringworld by Larry Niven.
Also, one of my favorites, I would think. Yeah, I've read this multiple times, but why is it your favorite?
I like Niven. I don't think I have ever read a book that Niven has written or co-written that I didn't like. And I like Niven's solo novels because he plays in a universe, known space.
Known space universe.
You know, and he has written a lot of books in known space. He's written a lot of books outside of known space, you know, in collaboration with other people as well. But he's written a lot in known space. And one thing that I didn't expect, but as I was rereading this, is I just felt a sense of coming home. Because they make reference to stories. Like they make reference to the story of the puppeteers all packing up and leave. I'm like, I know that story. I know what happened. I know what went on.
Beowulf, Schaefer taking the long shot to the galaxy core. Yeah. Mount, look at that. It's like, oh my God. It made me want to reread all of known space reading this again. It
does, you know, and Nessus, you know, standing up to the Xinti saying, hey, I'm the one that kicked Chuff Captain in the chest. I'm like, I know that story. We talked about it here in the form of Star Trek Log 10, but I knew that story from Niven, you know. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's a world that I'm steeped in and appreciate. And again, that was something I hadn't anticipated when I picked up the book this time. That was an unwelcome, or an unanticipated welcome feeling, rather.
Yeah.
But as far as this, I mean, it's just such a fun book. You know, it's grand in scope.
I think you're underselling it when you say grand in scope. It has more scope of any novel I've ever read. It's incredible.
Okay, yeah. That's upselling it quite a bit, but I'm not going to disagree. You know, and we learned so much, not just about the Ringworld itself. In fact, we learned almost nothing about the Ringworld itself. But we learned so much about the Puppeteers, which have been just, you know, background characters up until this point. We learned so much, well, you know, we learned a lot about the nature of the universe, too.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's good space opera. I mean, it never lets up. We don't ever get stuck anywhere. It never gets tedious. It almost never gets boring. And if it does, it's only for moments. You know, it just clicks right along.
One of the things I love about this book, and Niven in particular, Niven is great at this. And one of the things that just drew me into science fiction in the first place, science fiction is something called the literature of ideas. And I love just getting exposed to big, audacious ideas. And one of the, for me, tragedies of modern science fiction is that the genre has sort of moved away from that to sort of more sociologically inspired science fiction. Yeah,
moody and gritty. And and introspective.
Yeah, and you know, more about human relationships, which we talked about last episode is a weakness of a lot of science fiction writers. They don't characterize human beings well or accurately. But God, if there was someone who could do both, that would be amazing. But the ideas in this book are mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Oh. Yeah. So,
and he's not content with one of them.
No. He's got at least 4 big ideas that I identified in this book.
Okay.
So you've got the Ringworld itself.
Yep.
Which is a mega structure. Again, even mega structure is underselling it.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about something with the surface area 3 million times that of our planet.
Yes.
And that's a number they throw around several times. It's easy to remember. 3 million Earths in surface area.
Yeah.
Wow.
So to catch people up who may know a Ringworld only from this pale shadow in the Halo series, the Ringworld is a ring that goes around the star system of the race that built it at the orbit of their preferred planet. So if we were going to build one in our solar system, we take all the planets that are already there, including the big gas giants, mush them up for raw materials, and build a ring in the orbit of Earth. So a ring with 100 million mile radius.
Yep, 1 AU would be.
Yeah, and then 1 million miles across, And so that's, I mean, do the math. That's huge. That's
mind-boggling, and it's broken because you can't have a good megastructure story without it being broken.
Yeah.
When our heroes get there, but not so broken that it's not dangerous.
That's an interesting storytelling choice, actually, and I think it's one of the other big ideas in this book that I appreciate, the idea of the civilizational collapse and the fact that the particular construction of Ringworld makes it impossible to recover from.
Now, you see, that bothered me.
Really? Interesting. Why?
Well, here's the thing. So we spend a fair bit of time in discussion about why they built it.
Yes.
And the answer that they settle on is they built it out of desperation. They had no other choice. And the only reason they could have no other choice is because that race, amazing engineers though they were, did not have FTL travel. Mm-hmm. So the only way they could sustain their population was to build something that was really big. They had a lot of space to live on. And then this is part of why if the civilization crumbles, it can't come back, right? Because without FTL, they can't re-engineer themselves up to the point where they were before. But they have spaceships traveling back and forth to other systems.
Yeah.
Which makes the whole non-FTL thing seem like a complete non-issue. I mean, it takes them a while. They're doing it at 0.9C and RAM scoops, but they're doing it. They've got a shuttle system making these 23-year loops between adjacent systems, 11 of them, if I remember correctly. That bugged me because they created it. They created the Ringworld as an isolated biosphere, and then they unisolated it.
Yes.
So it's like you broke that premise.
Yeah. So I don't think it was so much the idea that the lack of FTL, but it's the lack of resources in the Earth, so there's no way to reboot civilization.
Well, from within itself, they can't pick themselves up by the bootstraps.
They could go and fetch iron ore from other planets, from asteroids, from whatever. But my understanding is that the collapse was slow and then all at once. I mean, it happened so quickly that they talk about the entire leadership of the planet being wiped out in the collapse of these falling. They had these flying cities and flying houses, and they all collapsed so quickly and just fell that people didn't have time to escape from them.
They didn't realize that there was a problem coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they picked up a virus or a bacteria on one of these trips that basically very slowly started to eat away at their room temperature superconductor, which is all their technology was based on. And then very quickly, all of that went away. And then all the starships that were coming back in were stuck on the outside of the ring because the Ziltang Brone, which is their way of getting through, broke. Their matter transmutation machines stopped working. And then there were no other resources to mine. However, what Niven fails to account for is the fact that there were tons of other resources to mine. They were all above the planet, in fact, in all these failed technologies.
Yeah,
there was tons of iron just lying around.
Yeah, the crashed cities.
Yeah. So I like the idea. I love playing in a ruined civilization. I think that's really fun, and it makes for great storytelling opportunities. And it's fun to see storytelling again. To see a civilization of this scale collapse, because again, the scale is enormous.
Yep.
Yeah, but not entirely worked out. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a logic hole there, but oh well, it is the fiction part of science fiction. We can forgive a little bit of that, I suppose. But yeah, and then this reminded me a bit of Gaia, and I suppose it's hard not to draw parallels with that, because once they make it there, everything goes south, and they find themselves, we're scrappy adventurers with only our wits and a couple of tools, and we have to somehow, overcome this and get out of here and get things back on track.
So Gaia came along much later, and Varley had the advantage of looking at Ringworld, studying it, and improving on it. But oh my God, and no offense to you, who I think prefer Ringworld to the Titan trilogy, but I think the Titan trilogy is just vastly superior because of it.
Well, I really enjoyed revisiting the Titan. I don't know that I would compare them against each other. I think they're a little bit different in genre, but there's definitely a lot of overlap there.
Well, there's a specific comparison I want to make, which is, as people are casting about the streaming services for epic properties, Why has no one ever turned the Ringworld into a movie or a series? And I think there's a very good reason for it. And the reason is it's an epic, epic setting with non-heroic characters. It's not satisfying as an epic. Nobody does anything noble or great. There's nobody that we're rooting for in this book. I don't know if that's true for you. Louis Wu is just a cynical bastard. Teela Brown is a child. Speaker to Animals is just a barely restrained homicidal asshole, and Nessus is a coward. Yeah, I'm not on board with any of these characters. Yeah, I hate them. I don't hate them. They're fascinating, and their dynamics are interesting, and it's certainly compelling reading. But if you were to make this into a movie, people would go, "That's it? That's the end?"
Okay.
Yeah.
The Ringworld itself could certainly be the basis for, an extended series or whatnot,
Yes.
But not with these
characters.
I don't know. I mean, because you're right. At the end of the day, what's the payoff? They got to leave.
Yeah.
They made it off. 3 of them made it off the planet, which...
And honestly, their struggles don't even seem that large.
Yeah,
right?
And the whole, Louis Wu with his whole super secrecy thing about having figured out a way off and not telling anyone about it. It's like, what could be more obvious? Literally, what could be more obvious? How have they not figured out what it is he's up to?
What could be more obvious, but also how incredibly selfish to hack up their castle that they're flying around in, deal with this very dangerous shadow screen wire, make all these adjustments to their plans on him just going, I have a crazy idea. If it doesn't work out, I'll never tell you what it is.
Yep.
Like, hey, there's 3 other intelligent people here. Why don't you
wire.
run your idea past them? Maybe they can poke some holes in it.
That wire. So there's more than 1 million miles of this wire have piled up on top of the city, and they managed to get the end of it, and they're dragging the end of it. And that's the only way they can handle it is by holding the end. So there's a 1 million mile long piece of lethal dental floss cutting down buildings and trees and animals as they drag.
And everything in his path.
Everything in his path.
Building has been turned to Swiss cheese.
And they don't stop, right? Because they take it through the hole and get thrown out at 770 feet per second. And that 10 million mile or million mile stretch of dental floss is still attached to the building, and the ship is going to keep getting sucked through.
Yep.
Yeah, they were pretty careless with the lives of the locals there.
Yeah. All right. So actually, so this is your book. So what are your favorite things about it?
Again, I love the fact it just clicks right along. And then, like you say, Niven has got absolutely no problem in throwing series of really large concepts at us, giving us a taste of them, and then moving right along. It's like, yep, we're just going to keep on going. How much time could we have spent in the Puppeteer home system?
Oh, my God, right?
You know, it's like, and wow, the Puppeteers left. Everybody's envisioning this giant migration of spaceships. No, Puppeteers won't get on spaceships. They're too scared of them. They took their entire planetary system.
Yes.
And they're trucking across interstellar void at 0.9 C, 5 planets rotating around each other at relativistic speeds. And they're not even going where they told people they were going. Or maybe they are.
All right. So you talk about the Puppeteers. That brings up another one of the big audacious ideas that Niven has in this book, which is, so the Puppeteers are a wonderful, wonderful alien race. I mean, first of all, they're physically weird. They think very differently from human beings. So that's interesting. But also they are massively, massively powerful. They could easily be Deus Ex Machina, except that they decline to get involved in most things. Except, however, we discover they've been selectively breeding Xin and humans for different qualities to make them more amenable to, puppeteers.
Yep.
That is astonishing that you're going to encounter an alien race and not fight it or negotiate it, but kind of hang back and just selectively manipulate it on your scale of, tens of thousands of years until they are what you want them to be.
They considered exterminating the Kzinti.
Yes.
And decided, well, no, they found the humans. We'll just let them fight it out for a while.
Yeah.
the gimmick they pulled using a starseed lore to pull the what do they call the outsiders?
The outsiders, yeah.
The outsiders into contact with an Earth colony so that the Earth colony could buy hyperdrive so that they could defeat the Kzinti over and over and over again. Yeah, I mean, the level of behind the scenes, the Puppeteer name is well chosen.
Yes.
And the Pearson's Puppeteer, if I recall correctly, the first person to meet one, his name was Pearson, and he thought they looked, the two heads.
Because of the shape of the heads,
they looked like puppeteers. Little did he know.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, a lesser species would have just said, hey, let's pit humanity and Kzinti against each other because they're both dangerous. One will wipe out the other, and then we can deal with what's left. But no, their plan is bigger than that. By pitting the Kzinti against the humans, and the humans being not as warlike, every time they fail, all their warriors get wiped out, and the ones who are left alive are more diplomatic, slower to rage, easier to rationalize, and become more domesticated.
Docile is the word that Speaker uses. They're breeding for a docile Kzin.
Yeah, they're clearly not docile. He overstates that. But they're certainly...
Well, from his perspective, perhaps.
Certainly more civilized.
Yep.
They marvel at the fact that they could actually, have a conversation with Kzin and not get their throats ripped out. And then the other thing is they're breeding people as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The first time I read this book, I was just obsessed with the megastructure. It's like, oh my God, Ringworld. And I went off on a tear, and I started reading about Dyson spheres and other megastructures. It's like, this is amazing. And that's literally all I cared about. And then every other reading since then has been all about Teela Brown. Yeah,
Teela, I had forgotten how important she becomes later in the book, which is disappointing because she's not that interesting.
She really isn't.
But she has no superpower. She is a victim of her own superpower.
Yeah.
Right. Which Lewis catches on to. But, the Puppeteers, they were successful in this project, and they don't realize, or maybe now they're starting to realize, that's not to their advantage.
No.
Because nobody is controlling what that luck is doing. That luck shaped things so that...
To catch people up who are not as familiar with the book or haven't read it in a while... the breeding program they put in place with humanity is they allow them to overpopulate to the point where they had to install some sort of population restriction, which they controlled and manipulated by controlling the fertility board, bribing and blackmailing and so on, to pass in a thing called the birthright lottery. So, if you were naturally smart or talented or whatever, you could guarantee have one child. But to get a second one, you had to be extraordinary, or you could apply for a lottery, and anybody could apply for the lottery. And their feeling was that successive generations of lottery winners would breed lucky individuals.
Right.
And that would be some sort of advantage to the Puppeteers.
And Teela Brown is a sixth generation product of lottery winners.
Yes.
So yeah, her luck, and this started to remind me, was it Well of Souls where we have the lead character that ends up being God?
Yes.
It started to remind me of that. Except she has no control over it.
Yeah.
Lewis's slow understanding of this was actually delightful to me.
Yeah.
Right. Because he starts up by saying, this is a kid. How can she be 30 years old or however old she is? How can she be this old and not understand, not even know what fear is?
Yeah. Fear, pain, loss, suffering.
Yeah.
She has no conception of these things because she's never been hurt emotionally, physically, in any way.
In any way. She's clumsy because she's never had a reason to learn not to be, because even though when she walks, and this stuck with me, early descriptions, constantly she's walking clumsily across the room.
Yeah.
She's sitting clumsily down. She's doing clumsily this and clumsily that. He hits this over and over again. She's never had to learn to be graceful because she's never banged her knee. She's never stubbed her toe. There's never been an incentive for her to learn these things. And her luck forces the Puppeteers to stumble across, in their mass migration, to stumble across this megastructure, to set in motion a plan that will bring her out there so she can learn how to be a better person.
And to meet the love of her life.
To meet the love of her life, which is part of being a better person, right?
Yeah.
So she falls in love with Lewis because it's demanded that she do so. She falls right back out of love with him.
Yep.
She's dancing at the end of some extraordinarily long strings. But, the whole Puppeteer civilization was dancing at the strings they've created now.
The thing I love the most about that is that little grace note at the end where they realize that the puppeteers are fleeing the core explosion. And they realize that the Ringworld is aligned such that the neutrino flux from the core explosion will hit the Ringworld material and not impact the interior of the ring itself. And even though that's not expected for 20,000 years, Teela Brown's luck demands that she be safe from that thing because there's booster spice on this planet, an analog to it, and she will probably still be alive in 20,000 years, and she will be safe from the core explosion. Yeah, that is just like, oh my God, that's huge.
Yep. Yep. This luck is bigger than the death of a galaxy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that I had forgotten. Actually, most of that I had forgotten. Yeah, I remembered Teela Brown. I remembered that she was lucky. But yeah, that whole... So much of the middle of this I had forgotten. In my mind, the book Ringworld is about their time on Ringworld. And that's, the last third of it at most.
It's so little of the time of the book, and it's also so little of the Ringworld that they explore. We get to see more. There's a sequel. There's a couple sequels that are not as compelling.
Yeah.
Where we see more of the Ringworld. But I think Niven almost does a disservice to his own story, and that the Teela Brown storyline is so audacious and so compelling that it should be more central to the entire thing. And it's not. They leave her behind. Just like, well, that was it. And we, the main characters, are going to go off and leave you here, even though you were the puppet on whose strings we were dancing. And
I think Lewis is the only one that understands how phenomenally dangerous it is to be caught up with her. I think at the end he's thankful that they escaped.
Yes.
I don't know that he says it in that way, but yeah, his awakening and then understanding of her luck never failed.
Yeah.
It was her luck that actually caused our starship to be destroyed because we were waffling about landing and it wanted her on the planet. Right?
Yes. Yeah. That actually brings up an interesting point of agency and complexity and projection. I mean, who or what is determining what's the luckiest outcome for Teela Brown?
It does.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not really addressed. Louis Wu talks about it in the sense that, she's a slave to her own luck. She's never going to have any free will. I disagree with that. I think part of her coming to Ringworld, as he says, is for her to learn how to develop as a human being, to experience pain for the first time. She steps on a hot lava where they landed. She sees one of her friends get horribly injured and learns how to handle herself in emergency. So I think she will develop free will. This kind of luck coupled with free will, that's astonishingly scary.
He does a very short story about that just for fun somewhere, and I don't remember the name of it.
Interesting.
But the central character he's got the Teela Brown gene. Mm-hmm. He's flying along in his little shuttlecraft, and it gets eaten by a giant space worm. So he sits down and he starts playing Mega Solitaire. And like 45 years later, the worm dies, and it decomposes enough that he can take off and fly away. The only problem is that, he won 3 hands of Mega Solitaire during those decades, but the camera ran out of recording media, so he only has proof of 2 of them. It's the most boring story ever, and Niven knows this, right? It's only, a dozen or so pages long, but it is so cute.
That's one of my problems with Niven, is he is so damn cynical. He sort of leaps ahead of things and then points out the absurdity of things. And I don't know, I guess I'm more sentimental than that. I want heroes. I want, even if they're flawed heroes, I want noble sacrifice. I want, people doing their best against hard times and overwhelming obstacles, and not just people kind of going, yeah, we can't do the God Gamut anymore because you look like a burned pussycat. I mean, it's just deeply, deeply cynical. And I see it. I think that sort of thing appealed to me much more when I was younger. And now that I'm older, I'm just like, ugh, that feels cheap. And it's the reason this doesn't feel like movie material to me.
Well,
yeah.
I bonded with 3 of the 4 characters.
Okay, which one did you not bond with? Teela.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, she was just unenjoyable.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know that I completely believe Niven, and that somebody who has never experienced these things can be so wholly ignorant and unsympathetic to them, because people around her have certainly been hurt. People around her have certainly, left her life.
But he says she has no empathy. She has no theory of mind because she's never experienced it herself. So she can't extend that to other people. For instance, when Speaker gets blinded by the sunflowers and he says, "I'm blind," she says, "But can you see?"
Can you see? Right.
She has no conception of sort of permanent injury. Yeah. So these things happen to other people. She goes, "Oh, that's a bummer. Anyway, on with my life." Yeah.
Yeah. But the other three, I mean, I like Speaker. I like Nessus. I like Lewis, and I like his solution to ennui. It's like, yep, I'm feeling down. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I am going away by myself to the edge of space until I feel like being around people again.
Yeah. So let's clarify like for me, because I said that I dislike them. They are compelling characters, and they are fascinating character dynamics between the group. I just don't like them as individuals. Like, I wouldn't want to hang out with them. Yeah.
Oh, man. Speaker to animals. I mean, how can you not empathize with... He's a Kazin, and he has been given the job of apologizing.
Yes.
His job is to keep other Kazin out of fights and to stop them from killing other people by apologizing.
Who was the politician who, when Reagan was shot, said, "It's okay, I'm in control," and he wasn't in the chain of command? Do you remember this?
I remember that it happened. I don't remember what we were talking about, but yeah.
So that's Speaker to animals. Every time something happens, he's like, "This is now a military mission. I assume command." He does this like 15 times in the book. "I assume command." And they're like, no, you're not actually in command yet. Sometimes he is and sometimes he isn't. Sometimes they let him pretend to be in command.
Well, Lewis was like, why not let him be?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to be in command.
Yeah.
Teela can't be in command.
And Nessus doesn't want to be in command because he's a...
Nessus is insane.
Yeah.
And everyone recognizes it. He has not gotten better over the time,
Yeah.
And again, we meet him earlier in The Slaver Weapon, that short story. I don't know if we meet him again in the meantime.
I have not read the short stories in probably decades.
Yep.
And I do want to return to them after this because, oh my God, Niven is so good at world building. He is so good. And he's so great at folding these things into this novel in a way that is fascinating, compelling glimpses of otherness and detail and complexity that is out there. And what's great about this is they're not just hints like in other novels. They're actual things you can go and look up and read about. And yet it's not like the MCU where it's just like, frick, I don't understand what's going on because I didn't see their 30 movies. Yeah.
Right. Now okay. If we're going to do a deep dive nitpick here.
Sure.
One of his short stories involves, General Products is the Puppetteer company that makes spaceship hulls. And they make four different designs, right? And one of their things is our hulls are indestructible. There's a lifetime guarantee. It is indestructible. A ship comes back that's based on a General Products hull number 2, which is 2 cylinders attached by a wasp waist. And the 2 people who are inside it are dead. They're jello. They are so dead, right? And we have a hero who goes and figures out what they did and what the cause is. And it ends up being they did a close loop around a neutron star, and the tidal forces killed them.
Yeah.
The Puppeteers did not know what tidal forces were. And our hero uses this as a blackmail point. He goes, I now know that your homeworld has no moons. I have a data point about your homeworld. I will blackmail this against you. Yet we find out their home system is a Rosetta of planets orbiting each other. They know what tidal forces are.
Yes, yeah.
So anyway. This
came later. I think this book came later, yeah. So
General Products, that's a good name.
Isn't it? It's just so innocuous. It's like, they only make 4 different hulls. It's so weird. One is like the size of a basketball, one's the size of a small moon. And
yep.
Yeah. It's like, that's it. Just put whatever you want inside. All right.
And he mentions that antimatter will destroy them. I know that. I read that story. Again, Niven is just so much fun.
That's the story where, there's an entire planet made of antimatter. And it's just sort of careening through the galaxy.
The person paid. No, he paid for the knowledge of a truly unique planet. He was bored and looking for something to do, and he paid somebody for the knowledge of a truly unique planet. Not what was unique about it. Just he wanted something that was genuinely unique. Yeah. And then he outfits himself in a GP ship and jumps out there, and it turns out that it's antimatter. And a particle hits the ship, and suddenly he's in a spaceship that has no hull. they were in spacesuits
Yeah.
because they knew something weird was going on. But anyway, yeah.
Niven's short stories are, I mean, again, getting back to the idea of science fiction as literature of ideas, they're just, bam, they're just, every single one has just some compelling idea at the core of it, even if the rest of the storytelling may be a little bit unsatisfying or the human characters are kind of like cartoons. There was one where a guy somehow gets caught on the dark side of Mercury. Do you remember this one? And he goes, well, his one consolation is that at least he'll freeze quickly and relatively painlessly. But because the temperature is so low, it reduces his nervous system close to absolute zero, and his entire nervous system becomes superconducting, and he remains conscious for...
I do remember that. He's watching little pools of liquid helium-2 flow around, which I had to go and look up at the time.
Yeah.
I had to use an encyclopedia. What is liquid helium-2? Yeah.
I love getting turned on to some science thing, which you can go and look up and just go, oh my God, liquid helium's a real thing? Wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if this were a tapestry, right, if this novel that we just read were a tapestry, there would be threads that came off of the sides, and these threads would go and be parts of other tapestries.
Yes.
Some of them much smaller. Most of them all of them much smaller. But yeah, I just love that. I love, he has got this known space, and he has absolutely no qualms about plugging bits from over here into bits from over there and making them just a background detail to a third story,
Yeah. Now, I think some savvy TV producer could cobble together something out of Niven's known space that is, I mean, there's so much there to pick and choose from, even if it's not this particular story. Although, here's my pitch, TV producers. Because Teela Brown, after her luck brings her to Ringworld and she learns to be a better human being and meets the love of her life, a guy named Seeker, who is basically a Fabio type. He's muscular with long hair and incredibly handsome, and he's a literal hero, and he's immortal, and he basically he's been walking for 1,000. His goal is to walk to the base of the arch because he doesn't know that he's living on a ring. But along the way, he stops and he helps people. I mean, that's like Kane from Kung Fu. I was
going to say, this is like Kung Fu. Yeah.
There's your series right there. We have these two people who are basically immortal, who are heroes. Nothing bad can happen to them because of Teela Brown's luck. But there's just endless variety and endless landscape to explore. So they just walk around solving people's problems. Yeah, in a collapsing, dying world.
Well, we've got a series of more books here, and that gets addressed.
Does it really?
It does.
I haven't read. How many are there? There's 4, right?
When I pulled it up on Amazon, it gave me 5, which was news to me because I was thinking there were 3.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, and the only one I remember is the second one, which is Ringworld Engineers.
But they in Ringworld Engineers, the Ringworld is becoming unstable, and they managed to get enough systems online so that the thing has got ramjet engines mounted all around the outside, which people have been salvaging to make spaceships out of, and that's why it's become, they managed to get it stabilized and enough stuff up and running again. They recreate, I don't remember if it's a virus or something where the people actually becomes a Ringworld engineer, but that's actually a bad thing because it won't let them do what needs to be done.
Interesting.
Which involves sending a hydrogen plume, a solar flare to the section of the ring where there are still a bunch of engines left, and they're going to kill millions, if not billions, of inhabited people to save the trillions on the ring itself. Anyway.
Interesting. I remember a couple of episodes from that book. I remember a lot of freaky alien sex. I think the term is Rishartha. So when you meet an alien species, the first thing you do is you have either actual sex or symbolic sex with them to establish relations.
Was that out of Ringworld? Okay.
Yeah, that was Ringworld. Yeah. I remember them dealing with the sunflower menace because they have superconducting cloth back somehow.
Okay, sunflowers. Yeah, I had forgotten about that.
Sunflowers
That's
are amazing.
absurd.
Absurd? But they're cool. They're so cool.
What purpose do they have? Why would the slavers have ever engineered these things?
I think as a deterrent. It's like you have a place you want to keep people out of. You plant a row of sunflowers, little moat, a sunflower moat, kills anything that approaches within, visual range.
During the daytime.
Yeah, during the daytime. Good point.
Yeah. Slavers. Now that would have been something fun for him to explore.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, there's so much in this universe.
There is. I mean,
it's so compelling and so deep.
A lot of universe
Yes.
he has crafted and played with, and occasionally let other people run around in.
Yeah.
He was open to Star Trek being in there, which is, how we got the crossover story that shows up in Log 10. In an animated series, you actually have a conflict between the Federation and the Kzinti.
Yeah.
Kzinti is plural, right? Because in a singular.
Yeah, there's a whole sequence of books called the Man-Xin Wars,
written
by people other than Niven. Yeah, I think he oversaw it. But although I never read those. That never appealed to me. I don't care about those wars.
I read several of
How are they?
They're fine.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun. I'm looking at it, through the dusty lens of memory. But the initial point at which humanity and the Kazin meet, that story, humankind is out there on a their ship is a reaction drive it's a light sail, I think. But they also have a laser that they use for communication with Earth, which also they can use for acceleration at a whopping, if I remember right, 0.05 G. So there's a line in there where it's like the Kazin have shown up and they've got gravity drive and they're running circles around. They haven't blown them up yet because they're no threat. But the humans are trying to get away, so he slams on the drive and people gasp as they're pressed into acceleration couches by 0.05 G. Wow. And then they end up killing the Kzinti ship by rotating the communications laser and burning a hole through it because they don't think it's a weapon.
Yeah, I remember them. I remember that story. They're scanning for weapons. They find nothing. The humans admit that they have no weapons on board, and but then I thought it was a fusion torch and not a light sail ship. But in any case, whatever the drive mechanism is, they just spin around and use the drive mechanism as a weapon.
Yeah,
and that gets referenced in this.
It gets referenced in that, the fact that we use non-weapons as weapons.
Yeah,
but the Kzinti in that were people that had fur. The character, if you read the dialogue between the Kzinti, they're just humans with fur.
Yeah.
Everything that they weren't ferocious, they weren't as rigidly hierarchical. They were a forehead glue alien species.
They present as Klingons early on. Yeah,
but as we've gotten more into, as Niven wrote more and more, they actually develop a culture again.
Yeah,
not unlike Star Trek.
Speaking of cultures, there was an interesting little detail. I mean, again, he just drops these ideas in. It's like, here's a mind-blowing idea, but we don't really have time to explore it. So, boop, there you go. The idea that on the Kzin home planet, there's a heretical religion which believes that humans are either gods or favored by the gods because they keep winning.
That God created man in his own image.
And so to gain the favor of God, they wear suits of human skin.
Hoping to fool him long enough to beat humanity.
Oh my God. I mean, he just drops it in a paragraph. He's just like, the implications of this are astonishing.
Yep.
Bloop. And then let's move on. Yeah.
At this point, only Kzinti males are sentient. Kzinti females are just, womb bearers. But we have, again, in one of his stories, there's a female who's released from a stasis bubble. I need to come back to that.
Yes.
Stasis bubble, who is sentient and fully functional. Okay. The spaceship that they take to land on the thing has an internal stasis generator, so that if something horrific happens, they go into stasis.
Yeah.
How does it turn off? Where is this generator? It would have to be inside the hull of the ship, right?
Yeah.
Which is the part that's enclosed in the stasis bubble.
Now, I thought about this, and I think they count on it having a very fast reaction time. It's like the peril-sensitive sunglasses in hitchhikers. It's like, oh, there's peril, boom, stasis.
Right. So, and now...
But I think it turns off and checks. I think there's a polling mechanism where it goes, oh, emergency, boom.
From inside the stasis where time is not passing.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's going to turn itself off.
That's a good point.
Because it's variable. It stays in stasis as long as it needs to, right? Because we have discontinuities that are only a couple of moments, and we have discontinuities that are hours when it crash lands onto Earth. Not Earth, onto the Ringworld.
Yeah, no, I can get around the variable timing. The question is, how does it stop ever?
Right.
Unless there's a way to call into, this is what I'm imagining, there's a way to call into existence a stasis bubble of limited duration. You can say, I will create the stasis for this long, boom, and there's no exit mechanism. It just stops on its own and then re-triggers as necessary.
In which case you would have a stuttering series of stasis.
And that's not how he describes it in the book.
That is not how he describes it in the book.
But that's my imagination.
So the only way it could work, as he described it, is the generator itself has to be outside the stasis field, which means it could be destroyed by, visible light.
Well, that's the other fascinating thing if we're talking about, stasis and ship design, is that for the first time we get a puppeteer. Puppeteers don't go on spaceships in the first place.
Nope.
But Nessus is insane, so that's fine. But then he particularly chooses a ship where most of the functionality of the ship is outside of the general products hull and outside of the stasis field, because it's all on a wing that's attached to the hull.
Well, that's what allows the stasis field to be installed, right? Because he needs the minimum number of holes. Yeah. And with this layout, there are 2 holes. There's the airlock, and there's a hole that cable passes through, which I think is a big ask, but whatever. So apparently having more holes in a spaceship, which you would have to have for reaction thrusters, sensors, weapons, he enumerates these things, would mean the stasis thing couldn't
be less effective.
Couldn't be done. Because you have to, you can't have a transition through.
Yeah.
Right. And this way they just pull the cable in. Not saying it couldn't have been done, but if you had to do it over again.
So speaking of stasis, there's another little mind-blowing thing which just puts in an appearance for about a paragraph or two. The variable sword.
Oh, yes.
Wow. The variable sword. So the variable sword is a piece of monofilament. It's a molecule wide piece of wire, which comes back again in the form of shadow square wire. And will cut through anything because it's just 1 atom thick and very, very strong laterally. But of course, useless as a weapon. But if you enclose it in a stasis field, it becomes stiff, rigid, and you can slice through literally anything.
And you can adjust the length of this thing. Yes. It can be inches, it can be feet, could be yards.
Yes. Yeah. When it appears, Speaker to Animals has it, and it's 10 feet long. It is 10 feet long.
And he's, from behind them, he says, I have a stasis sword. Turn around slowly. Do not alarm me.
Yes.
A variable sword, sorry.
Variable sword, yeah. That's just some amazing world building. Just like, boom, this is what I love to read in science fiction. It's just like the little pop of just like, oh, wow. What an amazing idea. We actually, when I was playing D&D in high school, one of my dungeon masters stole that idea for a D&D campaign, medieval technology, but this stuff called Shigawire existed in this campaign. And it was molecularly thin, but there was a sort of plant-based sap you could attach to it. And so they would build swords out of it by getting sap on either end of it, cutting it to a length, and attaching it to a wooden frame, attaching the sap to a wooden frame. And these swords could cut through anything. They could cut through steel. They could cut through bodies with a casual pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Go Niven. Man, I need to read some more Niven.
I am going to read some more Niven after this. I am probably just going to start working my way through the entire known space series.
Well, I went ahead and bought the trilogy. I guess it might be the original trilogy for the Ringworld, so I'll certainly finish those up. And then
you say original trilogy, but I believe Ringworld Engineers came out 20, 30, or possibly even 40 years after the first book. It was a long time later.
Amazon sold it as a box set, of course. This is digital, right? So, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. He's had time to think this through. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't remember enjoying them as much, but it's been a long time since I read those.
It's a particular kind of pleasure. As you say, it's a homecoming, just something very familiar and wonderful. And, you're talking about the later books.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember enjoying them as much either. I've never felt compelled to return to those.
Well, I'm going to give it a shot, so
yeah,
I'll let you know if we should revisit those.
All right. Anything else on Ringworld?
Oh, Lord. I think probably so, but I really, really enjoyed going back to this more than I knew I was looking forward to it. I was excited to read it, but I really enjoyed this more than I
All right. When was the first time you read it? How old were you?
Certainly high school.
In high school?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I read this in 7th grade.
And I feel like I missed out on a lot. A lot of these concepts that are blowing my mind now, I don't remember being that impressed by
I remember the whole Teela Brown thing being sort of more a distraction. All I cared about was the Ringworld and the spaceships and maybe the Xin. Yeah. So that's more satisfying in a revisit. Yeah. And so does it hold up for you? You talked about the familiarity and the return to something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it has nits to be picked.
What doesn't?
What doesn't exactly? But wow, I was all in. I mean, I burned through this in a day and a half. Not only because the deadline for recording was today, but yeah, I mean, once I got started on it, it was just compelling.
It's a fast read. Did you read the author's note? Did that come in your edition?
Yep.
One of the things that's really fun is that like so many people found this so compelling that they wrote into him with what passed for memes back in the day, but also correcting his math. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just saying, hey, actually, you would need the tensile strength of this in order for it not to fly apart, and you would need to be rotating at this. And he added the shadow squares later, I think, or maybe the shadow square wire. The orbital mechanics of the shadow squares changed between editions. And that kind of thing. That was amazing that so many people found this book so compelling that they're like, we have to fix some of your structural flaws.
And he freely admits them right there.
Absolutely.
Like, yep.
Absolutely.
These are the people who told me I got this wrong. These are the people who told me I got this wrong.
Yes.
The sediment in the bottom of the ocean. I wouldn't have thought of that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun book.
Indeed.
Classic.
If you haven't read
fiction.
it recently, go out and get it right now. Sit down, open up your browser window, point it at your favorite library or Amazon, and download away.
If you've never read it at all, well, okay, this is going to be an age-related recommendation. If you're our age and you've never read this book, you really owe it to yourself to read it for the first time. If you are younger, if you're a Zennial, perhaps you might just find it hopelessly offensive, I think. But man, I just think it's worth visiting. And if you're someone who's like not super enthused with the current landscape of science fiction, this would be sort of the classic sci-fi experience.
Yeah, this is what I expect sci-fi to be.
Yes.
But of course, this is what, when I grew up and those formative years I was reading sci-fi, it's what sci-fi was.
Yes.
Yeah, that could hold forth, but moving on.
Speaking of moving on, next time we have one of my favorite books by Cory Doctorow, Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, his first novel.
I am not at all familiar with this, so looking forward to it.
I think you will enjoy it, but we'll find out in a couple weeks.
All right, see you in 2 weeks.
See you then.